There are a lot of athletes who would love to be NFL players, but not everybody's good enough and they never hit the NFL field. But you can be on the NFL field if you're a referee. However, you have to be an elite referee in order to make it to the NFL. And this week's guest on Off Air was just that. This is Bob Waggoner, a retired NFL referee. For how long were you a referee, Bob?
20 years in the NFL.
You were a field judge?
I finished my career as a side judge, worked field judge and also worked back judge. So I actually started in the NFL as a back judge, and the majority of the years were there. And then I moved to the side of the field to finish up.
What year did you start?
Started in 1997 and finished up 2 years ago, retired 2 years ago. And it was just a fascinating career. I have absolutely enjoyed every moment of it and wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, it was a change of careers, or I guess an additional career.
I worked, when I first got in the league in 1997, I was a Toledo Municipal Court probation officer, and I worked there until I retired in 2002. So during that 97 to 2002, I was doing both jobs. And I was fortunate enough to have enough years in at the court system that I could utilize vacation time and to take the days necessary to fulfill those weekday games, or in case you got stuck somewhere and that kind of thing. So travel was always an issue, but I managed to make it work. But 30 and a half years of probation was enough for me, and so I retired from there and made this pretty much my full-time job.
You obviously didn't jump right to the NFL. There is a process. What were you doing in a football official's role before?
I started out in 1975, and I worked high school. I worked high school pretty solidly between 75 and 1986. 1986, I went to the college level and worked Division III in Ohio, the Ohio Athletic Conference and the North Coast Conference. And I did that between 86 and 91. And in 1991, I got picked to go into the Mid-American Conference. And so from 91 to 96, I worked in the Mid-American Conference. So really the process is, you really have to start somewhere. And most of the time where you start is you start in high school. Now, I did a lot of grade school games. I worked the CYO fields. I did everything I could possibly do to get as many snaps as I could. And to be honest with you, when you worked the high school, the grade school games or the youth games, they were probably more challenging than the upper level games, only because the skill level was wasn't the best.
Well, just like for professional football players, there's a scouting system for referees.
There is, particularly, and it's become much more inept today, in the sense that when I first started, somebody would have to be physically at your game in order to be able to scout you, see if you had what they felt it took to be official and that kind of thing, to move up. Nowadays, they do a lot of it through viewing of video off the internet.
What is it they're looking for?
Probably the first thing they're looking for is whether you're physically capable of handling.
You can run up and down the field.
That's the first thing. The second thing they're really looking for is can you manage stress and those situations where you're put into where you have to make quick decisions but do it under control, and not lose your temper, not lose your composure, and yet be confident enough in what you're doing. And I think that's really what they're looking for, and that doesn't always, every game you go to doesn't have those, but they look at enough of them today that they can find them.
Did the NFL pluck you out of the MAC then?
NFL plucked me out of the MAC, yeah.
And then you go to, is there another officiating academy you go to after that?
There's really not, I wouldn't say it's an academy. What they do is it's, nowadays you go to, you have preseason games, they have clinics that you attend. They try to give you a lot in a short period of time and then kind of put you out there to say, okay, we're going to put you with guys that can help you manage what you needed to do. And so that growing process. And I had a lot of good mentors when I first got into it. I was lucky, very fortunate, and it was a very good progression for me.
How long did it take to get you into an NFL stadium?
My first game was in Baltimore, the old Baltimore Stadium. It was a preseason game, and that was my very first game. And there's no trial period. You get kind of thrown into the wolves, so to speak, and you get right in there and mix it up. So my first regular season game was Oakland against Tennessee, and when they played in they were playing in Vanderbilt, I believe, and that was my very first game. And from there, it just kind of
It must have been
grew.
a shock. Well, you talked about the skill level. These guys are fast and big and strong.
Yep. And the one thing I've noticed in my 20 years, you think they're fast and big when you get in. When I finished my career, they were twice as fast and big. I mean, the defensive linemen can, run 4.4 40s. I mean, it's amazing what these guys can do.
Well, look at the old films from the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
You had defensive linemen who were clocking in at 235, 250. That's the bartender down the street today.
Yeah.
These guys are
right.
mammoth, and you have to somehow manage all of that energy and testosterone out on the field.
Yep.
I would think there's some times when it got a little hairy for you.
It did. You get involved and try to get in the middle of them. I will say this: the players are very respectful of the striped shirt. Every once in a while there might be an isolated incident, but it's very, very rare. They're very respectful of you, and you can, they listen to you. They respond to what you're trying to do, and in most cases, the players are pretty good with that.
And just like players, you get graded after each game.
Correct. Yeah, every game is reviewed by a supervisor, and they'll go through every play, and they'll have a comment. Probably if there was 140 plays or 160 plays in the game, they'll comment on probably 2/3 of them. And they'll involve you and some of the things you missed, some of the things you did right. But yeah, you do that every game, and then you review that so you can move on and try to prepare for the next week and not make the same mistake twice.
And if you're on a really good crew and you're a really good, then you get to the playoffs and the Super Bowl, and you officiated 2 Super Bowls.
I did. I was fortunate enough to officiate 2 Super Bowls. I officiated Super Bowl 40 and 49. And they were just wonderful experiences. I mean, you can't say enough about them. I mean, they're the big show. I mean, at the end, that's where it all happens, and all eyes are on that one game. It's the only game in town, and everybody is scrutinizing it for whether it's good or whether it's bad. So
you were on Gene Steratore's crew.
I was.
He's the guy with the microphone.
Yep.
For how many years were you on that crew?
I think I was with Gene. I believe I was with him for 7 years.
One of the elite crews, aren't
And
they?
I would probably say it was probably one of the top crews. We generally, if there was a big game, we were going to be involved in it, and which was nice. I mean, but
a lot of national television exposure.
Yeah,
too.
there was a lot of national television exposure, which can be good. Which
the eyes of the
can be
nation are
bad.
on you, Bob. You hold on to that flag. All right, we're at halftime here, Bob. So I want to run through some questions for you in a segment I'm calling Under Official Review.
Okay.
So let me whip out these questions for you. Were you ever injured while officiating?
Yes.
What happened?
Actually, the worst injury I had, I lost my 2 front teeth in Buffalo.
We have a picture of that.
Yes,
this
you
is a
do.
book of for Bob, given to him when he retired by the NFL. That's the picture. Bob's the one on the inside right there with his 2 missing front teeth.
Yeah, that was me. I lost him trying to break up a altercation, and a helmet hit me in the chin and drove my teeth right up into my gums, and I ended up having to have them extracted.
What was the worst weather game you ever officiated?
Actually, there were 2 of them. One was in Chicago. Chicago was playing Baltimore, and we had tornadoes, and they had to clear the stadium for 2.5 hours. And everybody nobody could be in the stands, and we all had to take cover. And the second one was in New England, where it was 14 below zero. That was cold.
Okay. I like the snow games, and I like the 60s and 70s mud games. Those are the most fun. I do not like artificial surface. Okay. Should you call what you see or let them play? Over officiating, Bob. Does it happen?
Yeah, it happens. It does happen. And I think everybody's arguments about consistency. We try to get consistency, but we prefer. We do everything we can to let them play. I'll just say that.
Okay. The worst penalty to call in the NFL, that penalty that really turns a game, you don't want it to, but you got to call it. What's that penalty?
Probably the worst one is the long defensive pass interference call, because in
Right
the
on the
NFL,
goal line.
when in the NFL it's a spot foul, so that could be conceivably a 50 or 60-yard penalty, and those probably the toughest ones.
Were there times you held that flag and said, no, I can't.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't one that if it was meant to be, we did it.
Okay. Commit the crime, do the time. Former NFL players as referees, is that a good idea?
I think some of them it is. I know in the college ranks they're working pretty hard to have them, where there are a few of them in the NFL, and they're doing a wonderful job. And I do think it speaks well for their work ethic and the understanding of the game. So I think it's a good way to go.
Yeah, I know they're trying to do that.
Yep.
Women referees, will players respect them?
I think it took a little bit to start with, but I do think they are now. I think it's starting to grow, and I think Sarah Thomas is the one that's in the NFL now, and she's doing a real good job. Worked a playoff game this year. She's really, I think, did an outstanding job. I think it's just a matter of time and seeing more.
Coach with the foulest mouth, who really gave you guys stuff on the sidelines? Rex Ryan, right?
Rex was tough. I will say that. Rex was tough. But it's interesting to note that it's really not the head coaches that give you the problem. It's a lot of the assistant coaches, and most of them, I won't say all of them, but most of them are special teams coaches.
Okay. Last one. Any player you always had to keep an eye on because they were dirty or they cheated a lot?
Well,
Bill Romanowski?
I can tell you probably one player that you had to really keep an eye on was Warren Sapp.
Yeah.
Yeah, Warren was a handful of times.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, justifiably so. I mean, he played hard, played well, but every once in a while, his emotions got better of him.
Second half, I want to get to a couple of important issues. One, you've seen a lot of vicious hits out on the field.
Yep, there's quite a few.
There's injury protocol. Concussions are a big issue now.
Right.
What have you seen out there?
Well, I think the concussion piece of it is happening more, not necessarily because of the hit, as much as it's happening because of the result. And what I mean by that is they're getting hit airborne, they're getting hit upright, and their heads are banging off the turf. And a lot of it's occurring from that standpoint. The other piece of it is they're doing a lot in player safety to try to keep the defenders' heads up so you can see what you hit. And that dipping of the head is really dangerous, not necessarily for the person that's getting hit, but for the person that's doing the hitting. So they're working hard to try to do that. The coaches, I think, are doing a better job. Over the years, I think it's really, really gotten better. The NFL's worked hard to do it now with runners. The crown of the helmet type stuff. They're trying to just eliminate the helmet in the play.
Well, I remember as a little kid playing tackle football on the field, and we would do kickoffs, but it was always two-hand touch because we knew that was a violent collision.
Yep.
The NFL has now finally come around to not two-hand touch, but trying to make sure that the kickoffs aren't nearly as violent collisions as there used to be.
Right. They've eliminated a lot of things on the kickoff. As you've noticed, they've moved the kickers up more. To eliminate the running starts. They're trying to position the receivers so they they have to be up more towards the restraining lines that they have, so they don't have a running start. They can't do those peel back actions. They're trying to eliminate that, and they're also eliminated the double team blocks to get those out of the game, so to try to prevent that action with somebody coming in second hand and getting them with the helmet. So they're really working hard to it. you know, if you look at this new league, the AAF, they've eliminated kicks off altogether,
Right.
and I think they're going to take a hard look at that to see if that isn't something that they're going to really consider, because the injuries in the NFL, the kickoffs are the #1 play for injuries.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to get to an issue that we've talked about in this community for a couple of years now, and that's referees. You mentioned you were the Pee-wee, high school, all the way up.
Right.
There are a lot of referees who are now dropping out because I guess that they catch a lot of flack from parents in particular, and I guess sometimes from coaches. Tell me a little bit about the losing these refs and what it means to the games if this continues to happen.
Well, it's going to be a serious problem down the road in that if you don't have the officials at the youth, they won't be organized enough to continue to fuel and the high school programs and the upcoming programs. They won't be able to do that. So as a result of that, you know, if we don't have that, the sports slowly are going to fade away. And the number of participants in football is down significantly. The number of referees totally, not only in football, but all sports, down significantly. And a lot of it has to do with time, a lot of it has to do with pay, a lot of it has to do with what you said. Abuse.
Yeah.
So there's some major issues that need to be dealt with, and I do know that a number of the commissioners are working hard to do it. And I know we are trying to recruit that and help them as much as we can, but unfortunately there's some things we can't control, but we're working with the organizations to try to do that.
Director Brian Mahalik wants me to ask you this question. Referees on television, Gene Steratore, Mike Pereira, a couple others, they're now almost in the booth reviewing the job. What do you think of that?
I think it's good. I think it helps the education process, and I think the more education we can do of the fan base, I think the better off we're going to be. And I think they do an excellent job at educating them. There are going to be those that are going to be wrong. There are going to be those that are going to be right. But as people understand the process rather than just the end result, I think that really helps the understanding of the game more.
How well did you know Red Cashin?
I knew Red pretty well. I never worked with Red. Red retired actually the year I came into the league. But Red was he was just an outstanding person.
Lives on in Madden football.
Oh, he was a fine human being, and it was unfortunate that the officiating community lost him.
He recently passed away.
Yep.
But and you may not know the name, but you know the voice.
Oh, yeah.
He was the man on the microphone who would always say, "First down."
That was Red.
Everybody remembers Red. Do you miss it, Bob? Miss being out there every Sunday?
When I first retired, I did to a certain degree. There's certain things you miss, and like the flyovers. I mean, you know,
Interesting.
I always, that was a fascinating part. The special days when they first responders, they would do something with them. They do something with the veterans. They do something during, you know, Cancer Week. Those kinds of things. You miss those. That honoring those that. You know, this is only a game. There's a lot more going on out there in the world. And I think that's the important piece. And those are some of the things I miss.
Well, the NFL is such a popular sport. We wanted to get you off the sidelines, off the couch, and onto the field. And we hope we were able to do that with Bob Waggoner, retired NFL official. Bob, thanks so much for going off air with us this week.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Appreciate your time.